that it is absolutely crucial that the competitive independent finishes 2, because if the competitive independent finishes behind Labor on 3, because they've dragged Liberal votes across, they'll preference the Liberal and elect the Liberal. Now, I know this is a bit complicated, but it's absolutely crucial to understand. For an independent to win in these very safe, wealthy seats, they have to get support from blue, red and green progressives. And Karen, because of that amazing campaign, strategic voting campaign, the Labor vote collapsed, the Green vote collapsed, and she came second on about 36%, I think. Now, this isn't saying that the Labor vote's gone down or the Green vote's gone down. What it says is that the entire progressive community has got together to beat the Lib. Now, what I thought, and I wrote about this in the Herald, was that if Karen Phelps won, that would force the Liberals to reform and get their act together on climate change. It didn't. They doubled down, and as a result, more independents are coming up. Now, the other thing I'd say to people who are sort of ideologically a bit freaked out about this, think about it from Labor's perspective. Number one, you're uniting to lose Liberal seats, okay, which is good. That means that the Liberals have to fight on 2 fronts. They have to save their marginals and try and win Labor marginals, and they've got to try and save their safe Liberal seats. That stretches their resources enormously and is a big advantage for Labor. The third positive is that if, say, 3 or 4 of these independents get up, take Safe Nat's Liberal seats, those parties have to reform, have to come on board on climate change, which makes Labor's job much easier to get the country moving on that. So I don't know if you find that convincing, but I certainly do.
Yes, and as I've often said, the first priority for me at this next election has to be a change of government. We see so many policy areas where they're in paralysis, climate change, of course, being the obvious example, but there are so many other examples as well. We're seeing failed infrastructure, we're seeing failed environment, and nothing shows that more than what we've seen in the past weeks and on the Murray-Darling and the Menindee Lakes.
Absolutely.
We now have a failed NBN that's going to hurt us at least for the next 5 to 10 years. We have no time to waste. We know that the Murray-Darling Basin Authority is corrupt. Is corrupt under this government. And Morrison is both siding that. Morrison this morning in a press conference, which of course he was allowed to say without any counter, is very much saying that this authority was set up on both sides of Parliament. He's very much both siding the results of the Murray-Darling Royal Commission. They will not take responsibility for anything, particularly this close to an election.
Well, they've been in power for 6 years, and the management of the authority has been corrupt. And Barnaby Joyce's oversight of the authority was malpractice. I mean, it's 6 years. It's 6 years.
Well, I've also heard them say that the reason. I mean, we saw the retail sales figures very down in December over the Christmas period. We're certainly starting to see these very predictable economic headwinds get stronger. Even the government is starting to point to the challenging times we have ahead. Just this week, Christopher Pyne blamed any upcoming recession on an incoming Labor government. They're not only blaming the state of Australian politics on the previous Labor government 6 years ago, minority Labor government, I will say, 6 years ago, that every day was attacked by the media. Now they're starting to blame a potential forward Labor government for the state of Australian politics. It really is quite bizarre. And again, media is not calling them out.
Well, I just go back to my previous point.
Yes.
Like we've seen over the holidays, just relentless day-by-day bashing by the Oz. Now, what are you going to do? Are you going to scream about it? Or are you just going to get on the ground and do something about it?
Yes. And, as I often say, this weekly podcast that I do is in some ways, my therapy session and my way to, as you just said, it's my way to combat and my antidote to a lot of the things that I see going on during the week. So yes, we can all do a little bit more, whatever that is, whatever our skill set kind of provides. I want to also just ask you about, we've gone through the socially progressive, economic conservative. I also want to just speak to you quickly about this overriding thought that we see again with all of these independents, that rusted on and long-term Liberal Party voters cannot bend themselves to vote for Labor. What do you hear on the ground with that? I mean, I certainly hear, I had a coffee with Dean Harris, who I think is a really good candidate in Warringah. He's a businessman that has taken this on. He's been working very hard. He's been getting out on the ground, meeting people. They've obviously got a solid policy platform, as we know. But he's certainly saying to me that that many Liberal voters are coming up to him and saying, never voted Labor before, always voted Liberal, but you've got my vote this time. But there does seem to be this overriding thought that rusted-ons won't vote for Labor.
Look, it depends on the seat, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, Warringah and Wentworth are two of the wealthiest seats in Australia. They want to keep their wealth. So, it depends, doesn't it? Like Bill Shorten says the same thing, but people are coming up to him saying, I'm a rusted on, but this time I just want a bit of stability, even though I disagree with you. We've seen in Victoria in the state election that there were clearly a lot of rusted ons that moved because they took some pretty wealthy state seats, including seats part of Kooyong and part of Flinders. It's one of the reasons why I'm a little bit freaked out about Julia Banks standing in Flinders, because there was a recent Breachtel poll that said that Labor could win that seat 51-49. Now, Flinders is a wealthy seat. It includes the Mornington Peninsula, but it's got a Dutton voter as the member, the appalling Greg Hunt, a Dutton voter and a prime mover in Dutton's challenge. So to me, Julia complicates the situation. To me, that's a seat where you could see Liberals moving to Labor. And the danger there, of course, is if she gets the protest Liberal vote, I'd be pretty sure that Labor would finish second on preferences and that her preferences would then elect the Lib. So I'm not, I can't really see the point of what she's doing, and in particular the fact that she's not a local, the fact that she lives in Higgins. I mean, one of the most important things for to get a competitive independent up in these safe Liberal seats is that they are an embedded local, because they know the area very well and they can make a promise to the electorate that they will serve the electorate in which they all live. However, Barry Cassidy said on Morning Breakfast that Labor's about to announce a really top draw candidate in Flinders maybe next week. So that gives me the sense that particularly in Victoria, Labor might have a red-hot go at seats like Higgins, Kelly O'Dwyer's old seat, and Flinders, because of that movement of Liberal voters. So you have to go sort of blow by blow. I mean, there is no chance in the world that Labor could win Warringah, and there is no chance in the world that Labor could win New England votes. So what Labor does there, as like what they did in Wentworth, is, one of their top operatives, Darren Barnett, who ran their Braddon campaign in Super Saturday, he ran Karen's campaign. I mean, Labor's not stupid. Mm. And Darren is now her chief of staff. So what Labor can see is that if you've got a crossbench which is on side on social issues and environmental issues, that's a huge plus for Labor. Huge plus. Plus, it's terribly damaging for the coalition. I mean, to have to fight Warringah is just unthinkable. To have to fight Kooyong.
And I think
it's unthinkable.
I think we'll see more. I'll just say my seat of North Sydney with Trent Zimmerman. I think Trent's safe. He's a moderate, but it's not a seat that's kind of it's not a high-profile seat by any means. He's on an 11% margin. I'm hoping that we'll see that reduce again in the upcoming election, and I'm hoping that North Sydney will be a seat that's in play in some way in 2021. Can I just say too, it's been interesting seeing the Twitter commentary about the rise of these independents. Of course, the Labor supporters think all of the independents are plants from the Liberal Party and are calling them the Liberal Lights, whereas the Liberal Party supporters are saying they're get-up plants and they're Labor supporters. So it's been interesting kind of watching the different, both sides commentary there.
That's not interesting to me, Denise, because that exact same thing happened in Wentworth. Karen's a Labor get-up plant from the Liberals, and Karen's Liberal Light, not from most Labor voters, from Twitter. Like anyone sensible would realise that they're not Liberal right. If they want strong action on climate change, if they support same-sex marriage, if they want the kids off Nauru, if they believe in Aboriginal reconciliation and a voice for Aborigines, which several of them do, they are not Liberal light at all. What they are small L Liberals, and there is a lot in common between red and green progressives and Liberal progressives. What there's not in common is the economics. But would you rather have... Look what's happened since the election. Karen's put up her... is she Liberal light? She has put up her kids off Nauru bill, which the government had to run away from Parliament at the end of the year to avoid being defeated in the House. Kathy McGowan put up a really strong federal ICAC, which the Liberals have had to say, we support an ICAC, but let's have a sham one. This is not Liberal light. This is a shake-up. This is existential for the Liberals. So, you've even had Oliver Yates, who used to run the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, which Abbott tried to abolish, say that if he's elected, he would be prepared to work in a Labor government on green issues.
Yes.
He's urging an electric car industry.
Yes,
we're talking transformation here. So look, if you want to vote. If you want to vote Labor, or you want to vote Green, or you want to vote for another independent, do it. Just put the Conservative independent number 2, and you'll get rid of the Liberal.
Yep.
And your member, you'll have something in common with your member. Wouldn't that be nice?
Wouldn't that be
nice? Rather
nice?
than having someone who represents nothing to do with you.
And
you will help the Labor cause, because the Libs will lose a seat.
And for reasons that we well know, that we see every day on auspol Twitter, the priority to me in the upcoming election has to be a change of government.
Let me give you one other reason. For a Liberal independent to win, they rely on a coalition of red, green and blue progressives. That's what they rely on. Now, do you think they can get it, that they win their seat and then they say, actually, I'm a Liberal, I'm going to go with every Liberal policy? They lose the seat next time. It's that simple. They have to cater to their constituency. And, talk about the difference between some Twitter Labor and some real Labor. I've been wearing my Karen Salter T-shirt for a couple of months now when I go out.
Yep.
Every Labor voter I speak to said they were thrilled on October 20. They were thrilled that the Libs lost Wentworth. And,
that has to be
as
the
I said,
priority.
Labor and Green voters got Karen into number 2 and got her elected, and they are happy.
And even Labor followers must admit that they don't agree with everything that the Labor Party does. I don't know if you've seen my policy comparison spreadsheet, Margo, that I one day put together. because I was frustrated with the lack of information about the policies that